The morning sun rose over the quiet town of Red Hill. The air was cool, and the forest behind the Miller family farm was covered with light fog. Birds were singing in the tall trees, and the sound of a running stream could be heard in the distance. Tom Miller walked behind his grandpa on the narrow dirt path that led to their hunting trail. Grandpa Miller was an old man, but still strong. He had worked hard his whole life and loved the forest more than anything. His hat was old, his boots were muddy, and his eyes were sharp like the edge of a blade. The Millers had owned that land for many years. It was not large, but it was full of memories. The cabin near the start of the trail was built by Grandpa himself. It was made of wood and had a small porch with 2 chairs. Inside there were tools, fishing rods, and hunting gear. Tom loved this place because it was peaceful and full of stories. Every summer, Grandpa told him tales about hunting trips, storms, and the time when bears came too close to the farm. That morning, Grandpa and Tom had come to check the traps near the stream. Everything was calm until they heard an engine sound. It was deep and rough. Grandpa stopped walking and raised his hand. "Hear that?" he said. Tom nodded. The sound grew louder, coming from the south side of the trail. It was unusual because no one was allowed to drive there. Signs clearly said private property, no vehicles beyond this point. Then through the trees, a dark green Jeep appeared. It was moving fast, bouncing on the rough ground, crushing small plants under its tires. Grandpa's face turned serious. "That is no friend of ours," he said. The Jeep stopped near the cabin and 2 men stepped out. They were dressed in black jackets with shiny patches that said Community Safety Patrol. One of them had sunglasses on, even though the sun was still low. The other carried a clipboard and walked like he was in charge. The man with the clipboard spoke first. "Good morning, sir. We're from the Lakeside Homeowners Association. You can't be hunting here without permission." Grandpa looked at him, calm but firm. "This land belongs to me and my family. There is no HOA here," he said. The man smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. "Sir, all land around Red Hill Woods is now under Lakeside HOA control. We're enforcing the rules. No hunting, no fires, no trespassing." Tom stood close to Grandpa. He had heard about Lakeside, but that was a housing area 5 miles away. There was no way it reached this far. Grandpa's voice stayed calm. "You're mistaken. This is private property. I have papers that prove it." The man with sunglasses stepped closer. "You think paper matters more than law? HOA rules are law here now." Grandpa looked at the badge on his jacket. It looked cheap, like something made at home. The letters were uneven and there was no official symbol. "That is not a real badge," Grandpa said. "You are not officers. You're pretending." The man with sunglasses grinned. "You can believe what you want, old man. We just do our job." Then he walked toward the cabin door as if he owned the place. Grandpa moved fast for his age. He stepped in front of the man and blocked the way. "You do not enter my cabin. This is my property," he said. His tone was calm but strong. The man with the clipboard said, "If you refuse to cooperate, we will report you. We can call the sheriff right now." Grandpa smiled slightly. "Go ahead. Sheriff Reed is my old friend. I will call him myself if needed." The 2 men looked at each other. For a moment they seemed unsure. The one with sunglasses frowned. "Fine, we will come back with proper documents. Do not hunt here again." They walked back to their Jeep. Before starting the engine, the man with the clipboard pointed at Grandpa. "You will see soon that you can't stand against the HOA." Then the Jeep turned around, throwing dirt into the air as it drove away through the trees. Tom looked at his grandpa. "Who were they?" he asked. Grandpa took off his hat and wiped the sweat from his forehead. "Troublemakers," he said. "They think they can scare people into giving up land. But they picked the wrong family." They sat on the porch for a while. The forest around them was quiet again, but the peace felt different. Grandpa's mind was working. Tom could see that from his face. Grandpa never liked fighting, but he also never let anyone bully him. "Grandpa, do you think they will come back?" Tom asked. Grandpa nodded. "They will. People like that always come back when they think they can take something easily." He stood up and walked to the tool shed behind the cabin. Tom followed him. Inside the shed, old tools hung on the wall and the smell of oil and wood filled the air. Grandpa reached up to the top shelf and pulled down a wooden box. It was small but heavy. He placed it on the table and opened it carefully. Inside were rows of metal spikes, old but sharp. They were made long ago for emergencies when wild animals or thieves came too close. Tom looked surprised. "What are those for?" he asked. Grandpa smiled a little. "Just something to keep unwanted visitors from driving where they shouldn't." Tom frowned. "Are you really going to use them?" Grandpa nodded. "Only if they come back. These men think they can push people around because no one stands up to them. But we will stand." He checked each spike carefully, making sure they were still strong. He worked quietly, while Tom watched every move. The sound of metal against the wooden table filled the shed. When he was done, Grandpa closed the box and locked it. "Let's go check the traps before the day gets too hot," he said. But his mind was not on hunting anymore. He was planning something else. As they walked deeper into the woods, Tom kept thinking about the men in their Jeep. He had never seen fake officers before. It made him angry, but it also made him proud of his grandpa. Grandpa did not shout or argue. He stood his ground with calm strength. When they returned later in the day, Grandpa sat on the porch again. He took out his notebook and began writing something. Tom tried to read it but could only see a few words. It looked like a list of materials: nails, rope, wire, and a few other things. "Are you building something?" Tom asked. Grandpa looked up. "Maybe," he said. "We might need a few tricks if those men return." The sky turned orange as the sun began to set. The forest was quiet again, but the silence felt heavy, as if it was waiting for something to happen. Grandpa looked at the dirt road that led out of the woods. His eyes were steady and calm, but deep inside Tom could tell that he was ready for trouble. That night the cabin lights glowed softly through the trees. Grandpa cleaned his old rifle and locked it inside the cabinet. He checked the doors and windows. Tom watched him in silence. There was no fear in Grandpa's movements, only care and preparation. Before going to bed, Grandpa looked out through the window at the empty trail. "If they come back," he said softly, "we'll be ready." Tom did not understand what his grandpa was planning, but he felt safe. He knew his grandpa always protected what was theirs. And somewhere out there, the fake HOA men were already thinking about returning. The forest stood still under the moonlight, waiting for the next day to bring new visitors who would soon learn a hard lesson about the miller's land. The next morning was clear and bright. The mist was gone and sunlight covered the trees like golden paint. Birds flew from branch to branch and the forest looked calm again. But Grandpa Miller knew peace in the woods never lasted long when greedy men were involved. He sat on the porch with a cup of coffee while Tom cleaned the fishing rods. The old wooden radio played soft music in the background. Everything looked normal, but Grandpa kept glancing at the dirt road that led into the forest. He had a feeling the fake officers would return. Tom noticed it too. "You think those men will come back today?" he asked. Grandpa nodded slowly. "People like that do not give up easy. They saw something they wanted here. Maybe land, maybe something else. Whatever it is, they will try again." Tom looked worried. "What if they bring more people?" Grandpa smiled. "Then we will still stand our ground. But we will be smart about it." After breakfast, Grandpa went to the tool shed again. He opened the small wooden box from yesterday and checked the spikes. Each one was sharp and heavy. He placed them carefully in a sack. Then he took a hammer, a few wooden boards, and some nails. Tom watched quietly. "Are you going to fix the fence?" Tom asked. "Something like that," Grandpa said with a small grin. They walked toward the entrance of the trail. The road there was narrow and full of stones. Grandpa began placing the boards across one side of the road, hammering them together into a small barrier. "This is not to stop people," he said. "It is to slow them down and make them think." Tom helped hold the boards while Grandpa worked. After they were done, the barrier looked simple but strong. A person could drive around it, but only if they were careful. Grandpa looked at it for a moment and nodded. "That will do for now." They spent the rest of the morning checking traps near the creek. They caught 2 rabbits and 1 squirrel. Tom helped clean them while Grandpa prepared the fire pit. It felt like a normal day, but both of them knew something was coming. In the afternoon, the forest grew quiet. No birds, no wind, only silence. Grandpa noticed it first. He lifted his head and listened. Then came the sound of an engine again, the same deep growl from yesterday. The Jeep. Tom stood up fast. "They are back," he said. Grandpa put down the knife and wiped his hands. "Stay close and do not speak unless I tell you to," he said firmly. The Jeep came into view, moving slower this time. The fake HOA men were inside again, but this time there was a third person in the back seat holding a small camera. The Jeep stopped near the cabin and the men stepped out. The man with sunglasses smiled as if he was proud of himself. "Good afternoon, sir," he said loudly. "We told you we would come back. Today we are recording everything for legal proof." Grandpa stayed calm. "You can record all you want. You are still trespassing on private land." The man with the clipboard waved a paper in the air. "Not anymore. This document says this area is part of Lakeside HOA boundaries. You have to follow our rules now." Grandpa took the paper and looked at it carefully. It had a fake seal printed in gray ink, not stamped. The names and numbers looked strange. Grandpa had lived long enough to know a false paper when he saw one. He handed it back without a word. "You can leave now," he said, "before you find trouble." The man with sunglasses stepped closer. "Old man, we are giving you a warning. If you do not remove your cabin, you will be fined." Grandpa smiled slightly. "I built this cabin with my own hands. No one will remove it." The man with the camera started recording again, moving around them. Tom felt his heart beating fast. He did not like how they talked to his grandpa. He wanted to say something, but Grandpa gave him a look that said, "Stay quiet." The man with the clipboard pointed toward the creek. "We saw traps down there. That is illegal under HOA wildlife rules. You will need to remove them." Grandpa answered, "There are no HOA rules here. This land is registered under my name, Daniel Miller, since 1978. I pay my taxes. I do not answer to fake officers." The men looked annoyed. The one with sunglasses turned to the other and whispered something. Then he said loudly, "If you refuse to cooperate, we will tow your vehicle and seal this road. We have the power to do that." Grandpa took a step forward, his face calm but his eyes sharp. "You will not touch anything here. You will leave now. If you have real authority, bring the sheriff with you next time." The man with the camera lowered it slightly. He looked unsure, but the other two stayed proud. Finally, the man with sunglasses spat on the ground and said, "You just made this worse for yourself. You'll see what happens when people ignore HOA law." They got back in the Jeep and started the engine. As they drove away, one of them shouted, "Enjoy your land while you can." Tom looked at his grandpa. "Should we call the sheriff?" he asked. Grandpa shook his head. "Not yet. I want to see what they try first." That evening, Grandpa and Tom walked along the trail near the exit road. Grandpa carried the sack with the spikes. The sun was setting and the road glowed orange in the light. Grandpa stopped near the exit curve and studied the ground. "They will come again, maybe with another car. If they do, they will learn to stay away," he said. He began setting the spikes into the dirt, pressing them so that only the sharp tips showed. Tom watched carefully. "Will this hurt them?" he asked quietly. Grandpa answered, "No. It will only stop them from driving here again. They will get a flat tire and nothing more. Sometimes a small pain saves people from a bigger one." When he was done, they covered the area lightly with dust so the spikes could not be seen from far away. Then they walked back to the cabin. Grandpa checked the locks again, then sat on the porch and watched the road. Night came slowly. The crickets started singing and the moon rose high. Tom sat beside his grandpa. "Do you think they will come at night?" he asked. Grandpa shook his head. "No, they will come in the morning. Men like them think daylight makes them right." Tom nodded and looked up at the stars. He tried to imagine what those men would do when they found the spikes. He hoped it would teach them a lesson. Inside the cabin, Grandpa wrote a short note and placed it near the door. It said, "Private property. No trespassing. You were warned." He blew out the lantern and sat in silence for a while. The sound of the forest returned, calm and steady. But under that quiet, both of them could feel the tension of what was coming. Grandpa had been through many hard days in his life. He had seen storms, fires, and dishonest men trying to take what was not theirs. But he always found a way to stand firm. This time would be no different. Tom lay on his bed listening to the night sounds. He could hear owls calling and the wind moving through the leaves. He tried to sleep, but his thoughts stayed on the Jeep and the men with their fake badges. Before sunrise, Grandpa was already awake. He checked the window, looked at the trail, and saw that the forest was still quiet. But he knew it was only the calm before another storm. The next morning came with a cool breeze that moved gently through the tall trees. The sunlight passed through the leaves and painted the ground with bright patterns. Grandpa Miller stood outside the cabin with a cup of coffee in one hand and his binoculars in the other. He watched the road that led into the forest. The air was calm, but he could feel the tension under it. Tom came out, rubbing his eyes. "Did they come last night?" he asked. Grandpa shook his head. "Not yet. But they will. They never give up that easy." Tom sat on the porch steps and looked down the trail. Do you think the spikes will work? Grandpa smiled slightly. They will not hurt anyone, but they will stop them from driving here again. That is enough. After breakfast, they went to check the traps again. The forest felt normal, full of bird sounds and the smell of pine, but both of them stayed alert. Around noon, they returned to the cabin and had lunch. Grandpa fixed a loose window latch while Tom cleaned the tools. The peace broke again when they heard the deep sound of an engine. It was the same Jeep, but this time it was louder, like the driver was angry. Grandpa looked at Tom and said quietly, "Here we go." The Jeep came into view at the bend of the trail. It was moving fast, ignoring the small wooden barrier Grandpa had built the day before. There were 3 men inside again, the same fake officers, but this time they were not alone. Another truck followed behind them, red and bigger, carrying 2 more men in matching jackets. Tom stepped closer to his grandpa. "There are more of them now." Grandpa nodded. "Stay behind me and let me handle it." The Jeep rolled closer to the cabin. The fake officer stepped out, shouting. The man with sunglasses pointed at Grandpa. "You were told to leave this area. You did not listen. Now you will face the fine." Grandpa stood calm and still. "You have no power here. Leave my land now." The man with the clipboard raised a paper again. "This is official. You are breaking HOA law." Grandpa shook his head. "There is no HOA law here. This land is mine." "You are trespassing." The fake officers started laughing. One of the men from the truck walked forward holding a metal chain. "We will tow your Jeep and your old cabin too if we have to." Tom's heart started racing. He wanted to shout at them, but Grandpa stayed calm. He looked straight at the man with the chain and said in a steady voice, "Take one more step and you will regret it." The man smirked and turned to his friend. "The old man is brave." He got into the Jeep, turned the wheel, and tried to drive toward the cabin. Then it happened. A loud hiss filled the air, followed by a heavy thumping sound. The Jeep stopped suddenly. The front tires sank slightly and air rushed out of them. The driver cursed under his breath and jumped out. Both front tires were flat. The men from the truck ran forward, confused. "What happened?" one of them shouted. The man with sunglasses bent down and looked at the ground. "Spikes," he said angrily. He pulled one out and held it up. "He put spikes on the road." Grandpa did not move. "That road is mine. You were warned to stay away." The man with sunglasses threw the spike on the ground. "You will pay for this. This is destruction of property." Grandpa pointed toward the sign near the trail entrance. "That sign says private property. You destroyed your own tires by ignoring it." The men argued for a few minutes, angry and red-faced. The driver kicked the flat tire and the man with the clipboard tried to call someone on his phone, but there was no signal in the forest. Finally, one of the men shouted, "We will call the real sheriff. You will be in trouble now." Grandpa nodded. "Do that. I would like to speak to him myself." The men left their damaged Jeep on the side and walked back to the truck. The driver from the Jeep sat in the back seat looking embarrassed. The red truck started and drove away slowly. Grandpa and Tom watched them until the sound disappeared into the trees. Tom turned to Grandpa. "Do you think they will really call the sheriff?" Grandpa nodded. "Yes, and that is good. It is time this matter is handled in daylight." A few hours passed quietly. Grandpa worked on cleaning his tools again, acting as if nothing had happened. Tom helped him but kept glancing at the road every few minutes. The sun started lowering behind the trees when the sound of another vehicle came. This time it was not the fake officers. It was a white county pickup truck with a blue star on the door. Grandpa smiled. "That will be Sheriff Reed." The sheriff stepped out of the truck. He was a tall man with gray hair and kind eyes. He wore a brown uniform and looked calm but serious. "Daniel, I heard there was trouble out here," he said. Grandpa nodded. "There was. Some men pretending to be HOA officers drove onto my land. They came back again today with more people." The sheriff walked toward the Jeep with the flat tires and looked at it closely. "I see they got themselves stuck," he said with a small grin. "You did this?" Grandpa answered. "I placed spikes on my exit road to stop unwanted vehicles. They ignored the private property signs and drove right into them." The sheriff nodded slowly. "You are within your rights, Daniel. This is your land. I checked the records myself when those men called in a complaint. They claimed this area was part of Lakeside HOA, but the official maps say it is not. The HOA ends 4 miles before your property line. Tom looked surprised. So they really lied. The sheriff nodded. Yes, they are scammers. They have been bothering folks near the edge of the forest, pretending to be authority. They take money from people by threatening fines. Grandpa crossed his arms. Then it is time to stop them for good. The sheriff smiled. That is what I am here for. I called for a tow truck to remove their Jeep. I will take their fake papers and badges as evidence. You did the right thing not to fall for it. Tom felt a wave of relief. Are they going to be arrested? He asked. The sheriff said, they will be questioned and fined. If they try this again, they will face real charges. The tow truck arrived soon after and loaded the damaged Jeep. The sheriff collected the false badges and the fake documents from inside the vehicle. Before leaving, he turned to Grandpa. You always keep things interesting out here, Daniel, but I am glad you handled it wisely. Grandpa smiled. Just protecting what is ours. After the sheriff left, the forest grew quiet again. Tom sat beside Grandpa on the porch as the sky turned pink with evening light. Do you think it is over now? He asked. Grandpa took a deep breath and looked at the road. Maybe for now. But men like that do not stop after one lesson. They will try something new when they think people have forgotten. Tom frowned. What if they come again? Grandpa's eyes were calm but firm. Then we will be ready again. This land has stood for generations. It will not fall to liars. Night arrived, and the forest filled with the sound of crickets. The lights inside the cabin glowed warmly, and Tom felt safe again. But deep in the forest, the echo of that Jeep's engine still lingered in his mind. Grandpa cleaned his hands and sat back in his chair. The spikes had done their job, but he knew this was only the beginning of something larger. He looked at the stars above the trees and whispered to himself, the land always tests the ones who love it. The next few days passed quietly. The forest seemed to breathe in peace again. Birds returned to the trees, and the sound of the stream filled the air once more. Grandpa Miller fixed the wooden fence near the cabin and repaired an old fishing net. Tom helped him, feeling proud that the sheriff had taken care of the fake officers. Every evening they sat on the porch and watched the sun go down. The forest glowed gold and orange, and the smell of pine and earth filled the air. Grandpa looked calm again, but Tom could tell that his mind was still busy. One morning, Tom found Grandpa at the kitchen table studying a large folded map. What are you looking at? He asked. Grandpa pointed at a dark line that ran through the woods. This is the Old Creek Road. It connects our land to the East Highway. It has been closed for years, but lately I have seen tracks near it. Someone might be using it again. Tom frowned. Do you think those men came back? Grandpa nodded slowly. Maybe not the same men, but someone working with them. That HOA story was too detailed to be just a simple scam. There may be people behind them who want the land for real. Tom looked surprised. But why this land? It is just woods and an old cabin. Grandpa smiled. To us it is only home, but to others it might be money. There are minerals in these hills. Long ago my father told me there was iron under this ground. If someone wants to build or mine, they will try to push us out first. The thought made Tom's stomach tighten. He loved the forest and the peace it gave. He could not imagine machines and trucks taking it away. That afternoon, Grandpa decided to take a walk toward the eastern side of the property. He carried his walking stick, and Tom followed with a small backpack. The path was narrow, covered with fallen leaves. They walked for half an hour until they reached the Old Creek Road. The road was full of weeds and broken branches, but there were fresh tire marks in the mud. Grandpa knelt down and touched the marks. These are not from the sheriff or locals, he said. These are new. Someone came here last night. Tom looked around. Should we tell the sheriff again? Grandpa stood up. Not yet. I want to see what they are doing first. They followed the tracks carefully. After a few minutes, they reached a clearing where the ground was flat. In the middle stood a small metal shed that had not been there before. Its sides were shiny, and there were 2 big barrels beside it. Grandpa's face turned hard. That was not here last week. Tom looked worried. What is inside? Grandpa stepped closer and peered through a small opening. Inside, he saw boxes, tools, and a stack of papers with maps. He picked up one of the papers through the gap. It was a blueprint showing roads, plots, and a label that said Lakeside Expansion Phase 2. Grandpa took a slow breath. So this is their real plan. They want to take the forest for a new housing project. Tom felt angry. But this land is yours. They cannot take it. Grandpa folded the paper and put it in his pocket. They will try with lies first, then with money, then with pressure. That is how these people work. But we will not let them win. As they walked back, Grandpa stopped suddenly. He heard voices behind the trees. They moved quietly and saw two men near the metal shed. One of them was the same man with sunglasses who had come with the Jeep earlier. He was talking to another man wearing a gray suit. The suited man had a clipboard and was pointing at the ground while speaking fast. Grandpa and Tom stayed hidden behind a fallen log. The man in the suit said, "We will start marking this area by next week. The old man will give up once we show the court papers." The man with sunglasses replied, "He already gave us trouble once. We might need a stronger way to make him move." Grandpa's eyes narrowed. He could not hear everything, but he heard enough to know they were not finished with him. When the two men walked away, Grandpa and Tom quietly returned to the cabin. The sun was already setting and the air was turning cool. Grandpa placed the blueprint on the table and studied it under the light. Tom asked, "What will you do now?" Grandpa leaned back in his chair. "We will give them one more warning. Then, if they still come, we will show them that this land fights back." The next morning, Grandpa wrote a letter and placed it inside an envelope. He drove his old pickup truck into town and handed the letter to Sheriff Reed. The sheriff read it carefully. "Daniel, are you sure about this?" he asked. Grandpa nodded. "Yes, I saw it myself. They are building on my land. They even have plans to expand into county property." The sheriff sighed. "I will take care of it, but you need to be careful. People like that have money and lawyers." Grandpa replied, "I have truth in land deeds. That will be enough." Back at the cabin, Tom waited on the porch. When Grandpa returned, he looked calm but focused. He started gathering tools again, rope, wood, and metal wires. Tom helped without asking questions. By evening, they built a small wooden frame near the entrance of the trail. It looked like a simple fence, but Grandpa had a plan behind it. He attached small bells to the top of the frame. "If anyone passes through here at night, we will hear it," he said. Tom smiled. "Like a forest alarm," Grandpa nodded. Sometimes the simplest ideas work best. They finished their work just before sunset. The forest grew darker, and the sounds of night began to fill the air. Crickets chirped, and the wind whispered through the leaves. Inside the cabin, Grandpa lit a lantern and placed the blueprint on the table again. He circled a few spots on it with a pencil. They planned to enter from 3 sides. One is the creek road, another is the south trail, and the third is the old hunting path. "If they try at night, we will hear them." Tom watched him draw with admiration. "You are like a general making battle plans." Grandpa laughed softly. "I prefer to think of it as protecting home." Before they went to sleep, Grandpa placed his old radio on the window and tuned it to the sheriff's channel. It crackled softly, giving them comfort that help was near if needed. Then they turned off the light and waited. At midnight, Tom woke up to a faint ringing sound. It was the bells near the trail entrance. He sat up quickly and looked at Grandpa. Grandpa was already awake, standing near the window with his flashlight. "They are here," he said quietly. Tom's heart raced. They moved outside carefully. The moonlight was bright enough to see shadows moving near the wooden frame. 3 men were there, carrying flashlights and tools. One of them whispered, "Cut this fence down. We will make the road clear before morning." Grandpa stepped out from behind a tree and shone his light at them. "Stop right there," he said in a strong voice. The men froze. One of them tried to hide his face, but Grandpa recognized him. It was the same man with sunglasses. Grandpa pointed toward the road. "This is private land." "You are trespassing again." The man with sunglasses tried to speak, but Grandpa raised his hand. "Leave now while you can. Next time I will not warn you." The men backed away slowly. Then they ran toward the trees and disappeared into the darkness. Tom looked at his grandpa. "They are scared now." Grandpa shook his head. "They will come again, but now they know we are ready." As dawn approached, the forest grew quiet again. Grandpa and Tom sat on the porch, watching the first light appear over the hills. The bells near the road still swayed gently in the wind. their soft sound reminding them that the fight for their land was not over yet. The morning sun rose slowly over the forest. Birds chirped loudly, and the smell of fresh earth filled the air. Grandpa Miller stepped onto the porch with his coffee, looking out at the trail. The forest seemed peaceful, but he knew better. The fake HOA men might try again today. Tom joined him, holding a small notebook where he had drawn sketches of the trail, the creek road, and the wooden frame with bells. "Grandpa, do you think they will come back today?" he asked. Grandpa shook his head with a small smile. "Maybe not today. They are learning that this land does not belong to them. Sometimes the best victories happen without a fight." After breakfast, Grandpa and Tom checked the traps near the creek again. They caught a rabbit and a few squirrels, enough to provide for the cabin for a few days. Tom cleaned the animals while Grandpa inspected the wooden frame near the entrance. The bells were still hanging, swaying slightly in the morning breeze. "You did well with this," Tom said. "They would not have noticed it before." Grandpa nodded. Sometimes a small warning is all that is needed to make people think twice. As they walked back to the cabin, the sound of a truck approached from the main road. This time it was not the Jeep or the red truck. It was the sheriff's white pickup. Sheriff Reed stepped out, smiling. "Daniel, Tom, good to see you. How is everything?" Grandpa smiled. "Better now. The forest is calm again. Those men have been warned." The sheriff nodded. "I brought a few more officers to patrol the area. They want to make sure no one comes here pretending to enforce HOA rules. The county has heard about these scams before." Tom looked at the sheriff. "So they can't come back?" The sheriff shook his head. "They might try, but if they do, the law will be on your side. You did the right thing by standing firm." Grandpa thanked the sheriff and gave him a copy of the blueprints he had found near the creek road. "These show their plans to expand into private and county land," he said. The sheriff examined the papers and nodded. "This will help us stop them legally. No one can claim land they do not own." Later that afternoon, Grandpa decided to improve the trail even more. He cleared fallen branches and strengthened the wooden frame with extra beams. He also set a few more bells, higher this time, so that even the smallest movements near the trail would ring them. Tom followed him, carrying tools and nails. "This feels like we are preparing for a big storm," he said. Grandpa laughed softly. "It is not a storm of wind or rain. It is a storm of people trying to take what is not theirs. We prepare the same way." As the sun went down, the forest grew quiet. The miller sat on the porch listening to the soft sound of the stream. Grandpa looked at Tom and said, "You see, courage is not only in fighting. It is in patience, in watching, in being ready." Tom nodded. "I understand, Grandpa. We protected our home without hurting anyone." That night, the stars shone brightly over the forest. The bells on the wooden frame swayed gently in the wind. Tom lay in bed thinking about the past few days. The Jeep, the fake officers, the spikes, the sheriff, all of it seemed like a dream. But it had all happened. They had faced trouble and they had won. The next morning, the forest was calm again. Grandpa and Tom walked the trail, inspecting the creek road and the wooden frame. Everything was in place. The spikes had done their job, the bells were ready, and the trail was clear. Tom asked, "Grandpa, what if they really come back?" Grandpa looked at him with steady eyes. "Then we will face them again. But they know now that this land is ours. They know that lies and threats do not work here. That is the lesson they will remember." Later that week, the sheriff visited again. He checked the trail, the creek road, and the cabin. "Everything looks fine," he said. "I have warned the county about these scammers. They will not bother you again. You have done a great job protecting your land." Grandpa nodded. "It is not about me. It is about the forest, the cabin, and the memories. All of this belongs to our family, and we will care for it." Tom smiled. "I am glad I helped." Grandpa put a hand on Tom's shoulder. "You have learned something important. Courage, wisdom, and patience can protect more than force ever could. Remember that." Days passed, and the forest grew calm. Birds sang, the stream flowed gently, and the sun painted the trees with gold every morning. The Jeep never returned. The fake officers did not come back, and the plans for illegal expansion were stopped. Grandpa and Tom continued their daily routine. They checked traps, maintained the cabin, and walked the trails. But now there was a new sense of peace. They knew that their land was safe. One afternoon, as the sun began to lower behind the trees, Tom asked, "Grandpa, will we ever see them again?" Grandpa shook his head and smiled. "No. People who rely on lies and fear usually do not return when they are faced with truth and patience. This forest is safe because we stood firm. Tom looked around at the tall trees and the flowing stream. He felt proud. He had helped protect their home. He had learned courage from his grandpa and understood the meaning of defending what is rightfully yours. Grandpa put his arm around Tom. Remember, Tom, every home, every forest, every memory is worth protecting, not with anger but with wisdom and care. Tom nodded. He looked at the trail, the creek road, and the cabin. Everything felt stronger, safer, and brighter. The forest had returned to its peaceful state, but the lesson remained clear in his heart. Courage, patience, and cleverness could protect more than fear ever could. The Millers sat on the porch together as the sun disappeared behind the hills. The forest was quiet, except for the soft sound of the stream and the gentle sway of the bells in the wind. They knew that the land, their home, and the memories it held were safe. And that was the greatest victory of all. Grandpa and Tom continued to live on the cabin, walking the trails, tending the land, and listening to the sounds of the forest. The fake HOA men were gone, the Jeep was gone, and the plans to take their land had been stopped. Peace had returned stronger than ever. The forest stood tall, proud, and quiet, a witness to the courage of the Millers. Tom learned that day that love for home, wisdom, and careful planning could overcome any challenge. Grandpa smiled at him and said, "The forest protects those who protect it. And now it protects us," Tom smiled back. Together they watched the stars appear over Red Hill, knowing that their home was safe and that their family's legacy would continue in the quiet strength of the forest. The Millers had faced trouble, clever lies and threats, but they had stood firm, and in the end, the forest belonged to them, and they belonged to the forest.